Hi, everybody. My name is Dr. Tamara Zubatiy. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Barometer. Barometer is an AI-powered contextual targeting and brand suitability solution. We serve the podcast space, and I'm really excited to be talking to you guys today about one of my favorite topics in the podcast industry, which is brand advertising. So today we're going to be talking about what a brand wants out of podcast advertising. And why are we talking about this? So only 14% of Fortune 500 brands have ever bought a podcast ad. That's a pretty remarkable green space. And over the last couple of years, we've really been engaging with these brands and trying to learn from them about what are the things that are unique to what they need compared to what we've been kind of historically working with in terms of performance marketing in the space. So today I'm going to talk about kind of the three main things that brands need in order to scale how they're activating in the podcast space. And I think that's a really exciting topic for all of us here, as last year was the very first year that brand spend actually outpaced performance marketing spend in the podcast space. So what we're going to talk about is programmatic enablement and all the cool new tools, bells and whistles that are allowing advertisers to achieve their goals through programmatic channels. We're going to talk about curation and its power to bring content in for inclusion and consideration. And we're going to talk about keywords and why we shouldn't be using them to block content in podcasts. So starting off with programmatic. Programmatic is super important. Last year, audio programmatically made up about 5% of the Trade Desk's revenue. And that was up 25% year over year. So in combination with what we know about the types of advertisers that use the Trade Desk, this got us to thinking, how can we help these brands activate more, and why are they activating on the Trade Desk? So the reasons why brands love programmatic activation are many. One of them is that it's a frictionless way for them to activate. So they don't have to learn about all of the intricacies and the talking to humans and all of the things that we do in this industry. Sometimes that can be a real hard boundary or a hard thing to overcome. So that's definitely one. Another thing is that they can layer on all of the cool ad tech that they love. They want geo-targeting, they want frequency capping, and they want things like brand safety and brand suitability. And so when tools like Barometer are available in places like the Trade Desk, it's possible for them to actually achieve their brand standards at scale in the podcast space. And why would brands want to do this? So what brands want, and the difference mainly between brand marketers and performance marketers, is where in the funnel is their KPI. So brand marketers care about top of funnel metrics. And so for that, they need scale. And historically, the biggest challenge to achieving scale in podcasting has been the inability of them to vet the inventory to their satisfaction at a pace that's reasonable enough to actually buy a media plan. So that's where we feel like we really fit in. And so that's why programmatic seems like such a natural way to get brands to activate. So the other thing that's interesting about programmatic is there's about 300,000 very active podcasts out there. But the top 500 have a really, really high ad load. Yet 4 in 5 podcast listeners listen to longer tail content, niche content, if we want to put a bow on that. But how can you actually reach those audiences? And so programmatic is a really great way to expand beyond just the top set of shows to really reach your audience in a more data-driven and agnostic way. So it's really important to not be biased against where your audience might be. And programmatic is a really great way for you to find those people, even if that means that in the future you're going to pursue a direct sponsorship for one of the shows that you bought programmatically that you saw really resonated with your audience. It's really not an either or. It's about finding the way to bring a complementary strategy. But in the case of brands, programmatic is a really important and non-negotiable part of that strategy. The final piece about programmatic that's cool is that you can work with digital budgets, not just audio budgets, which to those of us here who know about why that matters, it's really, really important, and that's really the only way that we're going to be able to scale as an industry. So that's it on programmatic for now. Next, we'll talk about curation. So what is curation? Curation is basically how do we make a show list? How do we make an inclusion list? Brands love a show list because it's transparent. They know exactly where they could go. They can go research the shows. It provides them a level of comfort. But oftentimes, publishers might see that as kind of a trade-off. Why would we reduce some of the inventory that we're going to give you? Or why would we let you see all the shows? How does that help us? And the answer is, it can actually create a lot of trust and value add in your relationship with the advertiser that will allow you to do more over time. So what do I mean by that? First, curation is a way to get people to do something like a run of network. Maybe that would have been something that's not tractable in the past, but if they can go through the list, they can apply their brand standards in an impartial way, and then they can get the resulting set that they're comfortable with, that can be a really great way to overcome that objection of I can't run in the run of network because I just don't know where I'm going to go. Another really cool and powerful thing about curation is you can actually include content, and you can work with advertisers to include content that maybe doesn't meet their standards 150%. For example, there might be a show that maybe has a little bit more profanity than they're comfortable with, but we know that it perfectly resonates with their audience. Curation is a really great way to get that show included on the plan and not blocked. So go curation. Other things that are important about curation is if you curate a show list, brands can actually be less restrictive with their episodic targeting. They're going to know which shows they're running on, and we've actually seen this happen where brands scale back the degree to which they're blocking when they're able to have a show list that they're fully comfortable with, that they're able to update on like a quarterly basis. It's a pretty low-hanging fruit, but if you can achieve that, the amount of transparency and trust that you can actually build with the advertiser is insane. And we've seen as much as 1,500x in growth of new reach that advertisers are able to get through curation. So this is an incredibly powerful strategy. The final cool thing about curation is brand standards aren't even the same across the same brand. So different campaigns have different goals. And so if you're reaching like consumers, maybe you have a different risk tolerance compared to if you're reaching businesses. All of these things are very important, and curation really allows you to fine-tune that inventory to the specific requirements. So we love curation and the ability to qualify the shows. There's also other ways that we can use curation to help overcome systematic challenges in the industry. So for example, blocking genres is a really big problem. If you block the news genre, you will block sports. You will block entertainment. The OpenTable Top 100 New Restaurants are news. Everything is news. News is new. And so the biggest challenge that we see is when people don't do curation and then instead they're like, oh, it's okay, we'll just chop off a couple of genres. And then that's how auto brands block Formula One. So there's lots of kind of positives and negatives out there to consider, but curation is a really great way to kind of get the best of both worlds in terms of scale, but also transparency. Okay, now we have to talk about keywords. So keywords are finally kind of sneaking into the podcast space as more digital advertisers are bringing their keyword block lists and asking to block things like the word terrorist. So that might be a really good strategy for something like display, where maybe you're trying to block MFA pages that are like scary and maybe they say the word terrorism. But what about when a news podcast publisher like the New York Times or Vox or Fox or really anybody, NPR, talks about what just happened last fall? Or any time. Like right now, it's kind of a crazy time, so there's a lot of discussions of this. At Barometer, we believe that you can say the word terrorist, and that's not brand safe. It's really just about the context. And so the original context for why people wanted to block terrorism was because a L'Oreal ad ran on a YouTube video that was an ISIS recruitment video. Obviously, that's not something that's possible in a podcast. And furthermore, the keyword, when we did the math, blocked 95% of all episodes across 3 top news publishers. In contrast, when they applied the Barometer contextual targeting to block high and medium and low risk, all of it for terrorism, they only blocked 5% of episodes. Like 95 to 5. Keywords don't work in the podcast space because there's a lot more words. So like a podcast episode is like an hour or maybe more. It's a longer transcript. And so historically, these keyword counting tools, if you say terrorist once, the binary flips and you're out. So to recap, brands are really excited about getting into podcast advertising, but they need our help to kind of meet us where they need to be met. And the things that they need are ways to transact in a frictionless manner in alignment with all their other channels so that they can compare it apples to apples and apply all of their cool ad tech with things like programmatic. They need to be able to understand where they're running, and they need to be able to build trust with you over time so that you can expand the buy. Curation. And finally, it's important to work together to educate the buying community about the harms of keyword blocking. This is going to be something that if we do it right, we won't actually have to deal with the consequences that other channels are having to still deal with today. And I think that's maybe the most exciting opportunity for us. So I'm excited that all of you guys are here to learn more about why brands are investing in podcasts and how we can make them invest even more. So thank you.